The following episode contains or may contain spoilers. So if you're spoiler sensitive, maybe beware.
Yeah, you sensitive people.
Get out.
No, get in. Welcome to the Phantom Zone. 3 fans, 1 podcast, and a sea of comics. I'm Noah.
Kayla.
Jared.
And today we have a Patreon fan pick episode. And also, this episode's coming out on Christmas. So you better watch it. Or not watch it. Damn it. Listen to it on Christmas. Whatever. I messed it up.
Listen to me.
People might be too busy to learn about the Green Lanterns.
No, for Christmas, you listen to this episode and find out all about the Green Lanterns, because that's what we're doing on this episode.
If I had known that it was going to come out on Christmas, I would have suggested we do the Green Lanterns and the Red Lanterns.
Oh,
Oh my God, missed opportunity.
well.
Okay.
Next
to
year.
be fair, we can blame Martin Sanchez, the person that picked this episode, because he should have said he should have known it was going to come out on Christmas and said that.
That's not fair.
Or
Not
prudent.
good. It's not good form to insult our Patreon.
I'm not insulting. I'm just saying they need to think ahead. It just
Patrons?
I was like,
Patrons makes more sense.
I'm not insulting. I'm blaming. And those are different.
No, I loved them. And yeah, so Martin Sanchez picked this episode. He wanted us to do the Green Lanterns. And so instead of doing the entire Lantern Corps and all of the characters in it, we thought, he said Green Lantern. So it's like, okay, we'll focus on Earth's Green Lanterns, because those are the pillars of the Green Lantern Corps, at least what they usually focused on in the comics. And that's what we decided to do.
Instead of the whole core.
Yeah. That's a tall order.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely going to get through the different cores eventually, but this was just a good excuse to actually focus on Earth's lanterns. So
Yeah, so no Kilowog, no Sinestro, you poozers. Yeah, I said it. Said I wouldn't use the P word, but it slipped out.
yeah, so I think a good way to start would be to explain what and who and how and where the Green Lanterns are.
Okay. You want to do this? You got it? You want me to do it? Kayla?
I feel like you really want to do this, Jared. So
I don't even know if I do, but I'll do it. So the Green Lanterns are DC's resident cosmic cops. They were started by these cosmic beings that look like elves called the Guardians.
Smurfs.
Yep, back in the beginning of the universe. So they're basically little like old men who are blue. I don't know.
With giant heads.
Yep.
And wear
big
dresses.
Heads. So just like old men. That's just what old men look like. But anyway, they have like a nearly omnipotent power. And in order to protect and police the galaxy, they created the Green Lantern Corps. The Green Lantern Corps, like I said, each one is like a cop that has a beat called a sector. Earth's sector happens to be 2814. That's not important necessarily, but and they each get a ring, and the ring harnesses the will into a part of the electromagnetic spectrum. So a Green Lantern generally, as you know, I've seen the movies and the cartoons and stuff like that, can transform that will into a green energy that makes usually constructs, like giant physical shapes, and, generally like does blasty stuff. They're good blasters.
Yeah. Specifically in comic language, hard light constructs.
Indeed.
Because it glows.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like a kind of a cop story.
Yeah, I mean, it really depending. With these characters, it gives it a good opportunity to do that. So it's either going to be a cop kind of story, them policing the sectors and arresting or getting a bounty on somebody, or since it is superhero comics and a lot of these Green Lanterns have been part of the Justice League, you get the superhero aspect to it as well. So
That's
it really, it depends on the story, the writer, who's involved, who's not, and then what era you're reading, essentially. So, yeah. I mean, they're just...
My favorite thing about the Green Lanterns is their oath, and that's the only reason I like them.
Oh, that's it.
From Hal Jordan being so funny.
Well, that's it.
I don't have it memorized, but I just remember stumbling across it one day, and then I was like, oh my god, that's the most badass thing I've ever heard in my life.
It's amazing.
Green
Well,
Lanterns are cool. I like them.
Since you mentioned it, and I kind of did want to cover just the fact that, like, if you don't know why they're called Green Lanterns, because it isn't necessarily clear from the just looking at the character or the basic concept. The idea is that the lanterns all have their rings where the powers emanate from, but the rings run out of power. So they have to use these lanterns which charge the ring. And the lantern itself is connected to the power battery and OO, which is like the repository of all the energy. And when they charge their ring, they have to say the oath. And
it's like a password.
Yeah, do you remember the oath, Noah?
In brightest day and blackest night.
Let no evil. Well, I thought we would say it together rather than you speeding through it, but go ahead. Sorry.
Asked me.
I know, I did. Go ahead, say it.
No, you really want to say it. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted us to say it as a unit because that's how it's done in the comics. And also I thought the rhythm, it would have a meter instead of in brightest day and blackest night, no evil shall. Anyway, so in brightest
that's how
day,
I would say it, because if I was in trouble and needed to charge it, I wouldn't be like, in brightest day and blackest. No, I'd be like speeding through that shit because it's like,
yeah, have some sense of drama. Jesus. Okay.
Exactly.
In brightest
Go
day
ahead,
and blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light. And then when you're done with that, you can say motherfucker at the end of it. Like, that'll help.
Huzzah!
That helps. Yeah, or huzzah, yeah. If you're an 18th century wizard or whatever.
Or if I'm Alan Scott, I feel like he would say that.
Yeah.
With his fucking cape.
That cape is cool as shit.
No, it's not.
That cape is fierce. It's a fierce cape.
So that's essentially, like he said, Oa is like the headquarters or the planet that the Guardians are at, and that's where the power battery that give the power to the lanterns by proxy give it to their rings. So it's all connected to one big lantern. Essentially, like the power battery looks like a giant lantern. So
there's a giant lantern in space, guys.
Yeah. There's also, fun fact, a planet that is a Green Lantern. So that's really cool. Yeah, Mogo. It's really cool.
By the way, we're all like, oh, they have a lantern and it looks like a giant lantern. You've never seen a lantern that looks like these lanterns, by the way.
I mean, ish. Like, I think Alan Scott's, like, the first Green Lantern, his looked like one of those old-timey, like, with the giant, like, bulb in the front. Like, his looked like a lantern. Everybody else's don't.
Now the lanterns look like if John Waters designed a lantern. Like
Very true. Yeah, so that's the basis of the Green Lanterns, how they operate. They operate from space, cosmic cops, and they're green. And their emotional spectrum is will. So I guess we should start with Alan Scott. We thought we'd mention him, like a little honorable mention.
Yeah, we want to talk about the Green Lantern Corps, which really begins this whole legend, this thing we've been talking about the Owens and the Guardians and everything like that. That begins in the Silver Age. But prior to that was the original Green Lantern, where the name comes from, the sort of original idea, which was Alan Scott. But the thing is that he doesn't really have any connection except in name and like basic sort of apparent power set. He has no connection with the rest of the Green Lantern. So we're just going to talk about him briefly. And the thing that you need to know is that he got his power mystically from a meteor that turned out to be the Star Heart. Now, the Star Heart is an energy source that's the embodiment of magic in Alan's universe. And classically, he had very similar powers. He had green light powers. He could create constructs and stuff like that. He also had a weakness. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But and his weakness was to wood. So very...
And the color yellow.
No. The color yellow didn't appear until later on.
Still,
that
it's
was
one of his weaknesses.
No, it wasn't one of Alan's weaknesses. It was one of Hal's weaknesses, but no, he is right. It is very dumb, and, and
worse than wood for some reason for me.
Yes, and it did, exactly, and it did go away eventually. The yellow weakness. We'll kind of get into it a little bit, but just know that was some issue that it kind of that got worked out over the course, and it's no longer really a weakness for the Green Lanterns. Anyway,
because comics.
but yeah. So and Alan still is a character that exists within the DCU. He ended up being sort of incorporated into the JSA, which were like kind of the legend heroes of the DC universe, all the Golden Age heroes and things like that. And Alan is also openly gay, which is kind of nobody knew that was going to happen. I guess Alan secretly did. I don't know, but anyway,
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things where it's like we talked about it on our LGBTQ in comics episode, both of them actually. It's like, yay, cool representation. Also, was it needed? I don't know.
That's how you don't do it.
Yeah, and it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, well, he has kids and he had a wife and stuff. It's like, well, yeah, but I mean, people in the real world have kids and wives and then they're like, I'm gay. It's like, okay, that can happen, but whenever it's somebody writing this to happen and they purposely make it happen, then it's like, well, what are the motives? Was this the right way to do this? Did you have to do it this way? Yeah.
But anyway, so Alan, even though he is disconnected from the major like sort of story and power source and everything like that from the rest of the Green Lanterns, he is friends with them. They do live in the same universe. He was a mentor to Kyle, Green Lantern we're going to talk about later, and usually a friend to Hal and stuff like that. So he's not completely disconnected, but anyway, but he's our focus. I just thought we should mention him since he was the original Green Lantern and where the name comes from. But I did want to say they're not in the same universe. They're in different worlds, Earths. Oh, they are now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they have been for quite a while. Earth
since
1 and
what?
Earth 2.
Since Rebirth or whatever?
No, since like New 52.
Oh, sorry, yeah, New 52. Okay, because most of my reading was like from when Kyle was
old-timey days.
What's that?
I said old-timey days.
Yeah, I guess. But I didn't. So actually, can you just? I know this is but now I just want to know. So Earth 1 and Earth 2 in the contemporary DC universe are separated?
Well, yeah. There can't be two Earths in one universe. Like the JSA, the JSA is with Alan Scott, but on the other Earth. That's how they explain like the different ages, like the Golden Age, Silver Age, and stuff like that. That's how they eventually explained it. Was like all of that happened on this Earth. That's why you have like, Kingdom Come Superman and stuff like that. So
you might want to edit this out just because now I'm just curious between the two. But in the late 2000s, it was the same universe.
Yes, but when
it re-separated.
Yes, when New 52 it's separated. I mean, that's just what happened.
No, I just didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
That's crazy. So New 52 happens, so something in Flashpoint happens, and that separates.
So again? It was in 1985, DC rebooted the internal continuity, which merged Earth 1 and Earth 2.
Yeah.
And so that's when he was reimagined and stuff like that. And then in the 2000s with the multiverse, that's when they separated again, and he was reintroduced as the new Earth 2 Green Lantern and a gay man and all that stuff.
Comics are
That's crazy. Mm-hmm. So is it just the Earth, but all the other stuff is compressed? So like, or is Shazam in a different universe again?
No, Shazam's in our Earth, like the main Earth.
Okay, so it's like, okay. Anyway, yeah, you can edit all that out. I just didn't realize that.
No,
okay.
I think that some people can hear it. I mean, it might confuse people.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, don't edit out the part where I said all those racial slurs, at least. Thank you.
Move on.
Okay.
Well, I'm taking the lead now because when we were doing this episode, I was like, there's only a handful of lanterns I'm even remotely familiar with. Mm-hmm. So Jared and Noah were gracious enough to allow me to do Hal Jordan, who is my favorite one. Because like I said, I don't know much about the other ones. Can't wait to learn. His first appearance was in Showcase number 22 in 1959. So Hal Jordan's been around for a very long time.
Damn.
I guess obviously not as long as Alan Scott, but here we go. He's in the main movie. Early childhood life. Again, I'm just learning a whole bunch of characters I even knew about. As a child, Hal was traumatized by watching his father, a pilot, die in a plane crash. And then he decided not to bow down to fear, which is very foreshadowy, and followed his father's footsteps to become a test pilot, which is probably the most dangerous type of pilot you could possibly be. And continued to be terrified every time he flew. And depending on the reboot, he tends to always have the test flight experience, but he's kicked out of the military for multiple reasons. In the earlier one, he was assaulting an officer.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Hal's not the straight-laced guy that Barry Allen is.
No, not at all.
And then so he was kind of demoted to just working with like engineering planes and giving them tune-ups. He's abducted by a dying alien, Abin Sur, and Sur wanted Hal to replace him as the Green Lantern Corps, but Abin Sur obviously is an alien, so we're not covering him very well. But I just think he's cool too. I think, Jared, didn't you want to do him before we realized we were just going to do Ones of Earth?
I think I want to do Kilowog, but Abin Sur definitely would have been on the list. But yeah, for sure.
He's cool as shit. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
But yeah, he brings them back to Awa. Green Lantern Corps trains them. And then he's in charge of, and then he's partnered with Sinestro. Sorry, this is all messy, but there's just so many interesting things that happened in his background.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And they kind of become like frenemies when they go on missions and stuff. They're not like initially hating each other. But then, when Hal finds out Sinestro is like controlling people with, the power of his ring, he's like, that's not cool. And he's a cop now, so he reports them to the higher authorities, and then Sinestro never forgives him.
By the way, he is partnered to Sinestro, and I love how condescending all the aliens are to humans. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They're like, well, you're a human, so you won't be able to read or write. Here's your Green Lantern ring, and it's like a teething ring or whatever.
Yeah, no, it's the baby ring. Yeah. You have to earn the real one.
Yeah. Yep.
Hal Jordan, like I said, he's been around for a long time. Some of his most notable, like, just characterizations is his partnership with Barry Allen, the Flash. We've talked about that a lot.
Yay!
How his fall into becoming Parallax, when Parallax kind of takes him over, ironically, gets rid of his will, corrupts him. He also served time briefly as the Spectre, which is kind of like a God's wrathful agent on Earth. He becomes kind of dark.
And really a left field turn, let's face it.
Mm-hmm. It's one of those. It's one of those stories where it's like, oh, the good guy's turning bad-ish.
Well, the
fact that Spectre and Parallax are kind of like considered, they're just different events. Like, Hal Jordan's not evil.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know that in the 90s, when everybody was doing these, like, the death of Superman stories, or Batman's gets his back broken stories, they were kind of struggling to know what to do with these characters, and they make Hal break bad real bad.
Oh yeah.
It was this, I mean, honestly, like, it was a hated but a very ballsy move. And the idea, if I may, is that Cyborg Superman destroys Coast City. I hope I'm getting the city right. I'm pretty sure it's Coast City. All the DC ones trip me up a bit because it's like Middle City and Round City or whatever. Anyway, so he kind of loses it, goes insane, and has grief and power hungry. And Hal kills almost the entire core.
Yep.
Absorbs this neutral power battery and becomes at that time a character known as Parallax. He feels bad, kills himself.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it turns out he feels bad, kills himself, and then the character's more or less ruined for a while. Like, they have to and one of the ways.
Well, how do you go from
exactly.
that? Where do you go?
Well, what it I think proved to be was time. Like they really just had to wait till the generation of people that were traumatized by Hal's turn more or less kind of forgot, or there was a new readership. But in the meantime, and this is why I mention it, I think one of the ways they tried to redeem him, at least in memory, was, to make him the agent of the Spectre. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah, you're fine. In the more recent, well, like I said, all that terrible stuff happened to Hal. He actually dies a lot too, or almost dies quite often.
Yeah.
In Rebirth, he kind of returns as a Green Lantern again, and he has his own self-constructed power ring. So his ring is now made out of his own will.
Yeah.
Which that's awesome, I guess.
That's like how Barry creates the Speed Force. Like Hal creates his own ring.
Yeah.
I mean, they're best friends, so it makes sense.
And then in terms of his relationship with the other Lanterns, I was surprised the Lanterns interact in each other's stories quite often. But of course, I guess that makes sense if they're on the same police force. But I mean, they'll always pop up in each other's stories and rescue each other from danger. Like Kyle saved his life several times. Hal saved Guy's life from Sinestro multiple times. And in the most recent one, he's mentored Simon and Jessica. And even gone as far as just fuse their battery to make them bond.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was like, that's such a Hal move.
Yeah, he's kind of like...
It's going to be infinitely more difficult for all of us to use their battery core.
He's kind of like the big mentor, or like the go-to lantern for, one, new lanterns, and then two, whenever shit hits the fan with the lanterns. So
yeah, and he's normally the representative, although other lanterns have been in the Justice League or will take his place. He'll typically be the one that you see moving around with the Justice League. On the really big, hardcore Green Lantern missions. And like you'd said, because he's been around longer, even though he is my beloved sarcastic asshole, he will be a mentor to the new up-and-coming Lanterns.
Yeah. I mean, he's in a lot of ways the main Lantern. You know what I mean? I know that's hard to say, and we're gonna see how this sort of all cashes out, like how the other personalities exist, but he's kind of the main one. And I always like to add this because I think for a lot of people, they kind of don't get Hal, or he kind of gets washed out, or he gets a bit generic in the face of the other Justice League characters. But what's interesting about Hal Jordan is he's one of those characters that actually is inspired by a real life person. And Ghost Rider is another example. Evil Knievel and the popularity of stunt racing sort of made, it launched the Ghost Rider. So Chuck Yeager, the guy that broke the sound barrier, the land speed sound barrier, that was the conception of this character was, what if that guy was a superhero? So rather than a mild-mannered reporter or something like that, what if this balls to the wall, sort of fearless person had that kind of power?
Junkie.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think he is an original concept in that, and Hal is to me the best when he's written in that way. When he's always that test pilot that's willing to push it past the engine tolerances or something like that.
Yeah, he still has that mentality and stuff. I mean, he's furthest from a pilot now because he's been a Green Lantern for so long. I mean, most of the time you kind of remember that he was a pilot is if, one, he says it, two, if Carol shows up, or
he always wears the bomber jacket,
he wears the bomber jacket, or he just, most of his constructs are fighter jets.
I was just gonna say, he will hit you with an F-15, a giant green F-15.
Yeah, it's we get it, how you like planes. We get it.
Okay, but I love him.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Conclusion.
Yay.
Yeah.
Who's next?
I mean, when the chips are down, Hal's the guy you go to. And actually, before we get to our next Green Lantern, I wanted to mention this up top, but this is a good part to do it. When it comes to superheroes, I think a lot of times we put a lot of investment in the idea that their powers determine things or their appearance determine things, and those certainly have their effect. But I think what's interesting about the Green Lantern Corps is all the characters that we're going to talk about have the exact same powers and look virtually the exact same.
Ish.
And yeah, exactly. But to me, there is testament that personality and characterization really does make a tremendous, like, crucial part of comic books.
Especially when they often appear in each other's stories.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and then you also, I mean, what's particular with this type of character, the Green Lanterns, and their powers being fed through their will, the wielder's will. So that really determines, like, the intensity or how much they can do or how powerful they can be. So, I mean, if your will is wavering, then your abilities will waver as well. So, just wanted to put that out there too.
But I just think it's interesting because, like, a lot of times you'll have comic book characters where, like, they're gonna have 2 Hulks, and people get really pissed. It's like, that's gonna take away the specialness of the original or whatever it is. And it's like, well, the Green Lanterns have 12 that are like carbon copies of each other in terms of powers and appearance, but it's their attitudes, their personalities, their histories, and everything like that really distinguish them. And this is a great example. The next character that we're going to talk about is my favorite Green Lantern, Guy Gardner.
He's my second favorite.
That's great. I'm glad you like Guy. And so with Hal lays down basically the kind of like formula for a good Green Lantern. He's the base. He's the mold, so to speak. But Guy is very different. And I mean, in a lot of ways, Guy is the Raphael of the Lantern crew, or the asshole. I always like the Raphael. I don't know what that is. But in certain ways, this is coming out on Christmas, which is good because in certain ways, Guy Gardner answers the question, what if the bully from A Christmas Story became a Green Lantern?
Oh, no.
He's such an asshole. Not in the lovable way that Hal.
Oh, but wait, you'll find the plot's going to really thicken on this character. I really love talking about Guy because he's so not what you think, but it's fun. Mm-hmm. But he's also got red hair. He's the Ginger Lantern, so he's red hair on green. He looks like
Christmas.
That's what I'm saying. That's why they call him the Christmas Lantern. They don't, but they should. They should. Mm-hmm. They should do that. But so here's the deal. Guy grew up in a relatively abusive home. His dad was a drunk, beat him up, and stuff like that. So he kind of begins with a sob story. And as he grows up and like he's turning 17, 18, that kind of thing, he kind of flirts with crime, like low-level stuff, like stealing cars or whatever. His brother turns out to be a cop. And his brother ends up like trying to set him straight and kind of putting him on the right path. Rather than arrest him, he sends his 2 other cop buddies to beat the shit out of Guy and give him money and be like, turn your life around, you son of a bitch. You're my kid brother. That's what I assume he says. And it works. And Guy actually kind of goes in a positive direction. Unfortunately, his brother ends up in a scandal where he's like a corrupt cop and like found out to be corrupt or whatever, extorting criminals or something like that. And then he kills himself. And then his dad drinks himself to death in response to that. So Guy has all this tragedy, right? And I bet you think, I know. I bet you think I'm going to be like, and that's why he's such an asshole. Well, that's kind of true. So he's got a lot of anger issues. But what does Guy do in response to all that tragedy? He becomes a social worker trying to help inmates and felons deal with their anger issues. So he's this awesome person who just seems like a dick. And it turns out that's how he meets Hal Jordan, because Hal Jordan was in prison for a while due to alcoholism. You should read up on that, as we can't get into it, but Hal had some rough patches himself.
Whoa.
And then, yeah, I know. And then when Guy decides, that this makes me too angry, I can't do this job anymore, then he becomes a phys ed coach for kids with special needs. Yeah. Who's the asshole now?
I mean,
I love this about Guy, though. It's like, it's one of those things like, he has a bad attitude, which is true. He's very rough. But then anything about him that you find out, it's like, oh, he's a really, really good person. Which is kind of how it gets cashed out in the comics. He's always like the skull cracker of the Green Lantern crew, but he's never bad. And I think that Jeff Johns actually made this point about him. It was like, in a quote, he's like, Guy's not the moron. Guy is the shit kicker. Because if you don't read the Green Lantern comics, you might get a sense of, he's the guy that like beats up children, which just isn't really his history or whatever.
No, he teaches them kickball, actually.
Yeah, exactly, right? But so the way Guy enters into the Green Lantern world essentially is that, and I think this is interesting too, is that when Abensor crashes to Earth, the ring scans the entire planet, as it's known to do, to find suitable users, and it only finds 2, which, by the way, is kind of dramatic of a planet of like 8 billion people, or maybe 7 at the time, like only 2. It was Guy Gardner. And
both
Hal.
happen to be white.
Yes, yeah, and American. And male and heterosexual. Anyway, so
Yeah.
but
I don't know about Guy. I
That's
think Guy's
called.
a little-
Yeah, you're right. He's probably pansexual. Good point, Noah. Anyway, so no, but what's weird about it is that like not only are they the only 2 worthy people, the ring judges Guy as more worthy, but he's further away, and it's an emergency. So Hal has made that's
a fucking lazy ass ring.
I know.
That can travel through space. It decides, 1,000 more miles. I don't want to do that. Let's just pick this guy.
Those are called priorities, okay?
That's a cost.
Also, we don't know, because it's like, it might have been the difference between an A+ and an A. You know what I mean? Like, they're both, like, great. Clearly, Hal's... And actually, there's, I think Booster Gold at one point goes back to convince Guy to not be that first lantern.
Yeah.
Because he, a couple things... Apparently, according to that history, if he had been, Guy would have been killed very early, and also Hal wouldn't have saved the universe 1,000 times over or whatever. But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, they made sense of it, but like when that happened, like before you find like that out, or like they do this kind of like, well, let's like explain this stupid thing because it's stupid. Like it's stupid. It's stupid.
It is stupid, but so eventually, when Hal finds this out, the idea is that he befriends Guy, and then they become kind of I think actually Kayla mentioned this already. Guy becomes Hal's sort of like understudy almost, or the idea is like
like backup.
Yeah, and so he does get he takes him to Oa. Guy gets trained, and he becomes like the second major Earther. Or like Terran Green Lantern or whatever, and then he's just sort of like a backup Green Lantern. He appears in stories and stuff like that. He's injured several times. Guy is the most concussed superhero ever. Like, I mean, over the course of his history,
there's
exactly.
One of recent-ish times, whenever like the Yellow Lantern Corps had kidnapped him. Because during Rebirth, whenever the Green Lanterns came back and stuff, and Hal was nowhere to be found, Guy was kidnapped and severely tortured, like to the point where he was just where he was almost like just dead, and Guy was like enjoying it. He was like, "Yeah, just keep going. Like I can handle this." He's like, "I'm still not going to give you information." I'm like, "God, okay, Guy. Like, geez,
yeah, he's a tough ass." but. Over the course of his history, like especially in this period of time, he gets knocked out or hit in the head or like exploded and ends up in a coma, and it like changes several times, like his attitude, like he becomes more erratic and crazy, or like gentler on the basis. It's like it becomes a weird, like it punctuates his character history a lot. It's just weird. I think it's like one of those things. Well, a thing happens in comics, it makes a certain splash, and then writers go back and refer to it a lot, so that kind of becomes part of it, his history. There's a period of time where he actually gets his reputation for being kind of a really obnoxious asshole. He was on the Justice League International with Batman for a while and a number of other things, and he really didn't like Batman's leadership. He didn't like being told what to do, and I get it. Batman could be kind of prickly. Well, he makes exactly. So he makes them exactly. And if you're a cop from that watches over the universe, maybe you don't want to like be subservient to this like weird fetish dude. You know what I mean? Like,
excuse me.
Dressed in a leather
it's what he would
bat
look
suit.
like. Yeah. And so he kind of steps up to Batman, and Batman punches him and knocks him out. It's one of Guy's biggest moments.
That panel. I love that
It's
panel.
fantastic.
Isn't that the same era where he moons the whole Justice League? Like
no,
outside
that
of
was
the
that was
Watchtower?
way later. No, that was way later.
What?
Yeah, he like moons that, like they like they're at the watchtower and they look over and a guy is just like has his ass on the window.
Yeah, it's great.
I love him.
So another notable thing to mention about him, which is sort of really cool, at a time he lost his Green Lantern ring. Hal comes back and like kind of repossesses it in a sense, in a period where like Hal had like been away for a while. He gets the Lantern ring back, and he doesn't. Guy doesn't want to be without powers because he's kind of really accustomed to them. So he goes to Oa. He tricks Lobo to take him there. He goes to the cemetery and finds Sinestro's dead corpse. Well, that's how corpses are. They're dead. But he grabs the corpse and pries the yellow ring off his cold, dead hand. And for some period of time, Guy just uses Sinestro's yellow power ring. And that's just his sort of thing. And through most of this period, by the way, he just doesn't have powers. And there's several instantiations where he has other means to have powers. Like he was a Voldarian for a while. You'd have to look it up. It's kind of weird. He could like make weapons with his body. Like it was like almost a techno-organic thing. Anyway, the point is to round this out.
He was a Red Lantern too.
Well, that's what I was going to get to. When Rebirth happens, and Hal comes back and he's redeemed and everything like that, Guy gets his ring back, and he finally gets welcomed back into the Corps. And then Guy just understood from then on out to be like a veteran member of the Corps, one of the main 3 or 4 or 5 that we're going to talk about. And the last thing I'll say is something that Noah just kind of mentioned, because post the War of Light, when all the other colored lantern rings are out there. It's really popular for Green Lanterns for any number of reasons to have to use one of those rings, and usually Guy ends up, because of his personality, becoming a Red Lantern. There's been a couple times where he's just had
because
both
of his
of
hair.
them.
It's
That
because
too.
of his hair.
well, redheads are a fiery lot. We know that.
Red Lantern immediately.
Yes. But yeah, so that's Guy. He's like my favorite Lantern. He's yeah. I like him because he's more complicated than he seems, and at the end of the day, he does what's right. Bam.
Yeah, boy.
Nice.
Yep. On to the
I
next.
believe I'm next.
Yep.
All right, so the other lantern that I know things about is John Stewart. He was introduced in Green Lantern number 87, and that was in early 1972, and he became DC's first black superhero.
Hell yeah.
So
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's kind of a shame that it took until the 70s to have a black superhero. But yeah, DC's first black superhero was John Stewart. The overarching theme that you will find is that he's just like kind of perfect.
Pretty much.
He's like, when he was first conceived, he was conceived. That's such a weird term to say that.
He was
when
birthed.
He was first introduced into comics. He was an architect, and it was later rewritten that he became like member of the Marine Corps.
I like the architect more. Just saying.
Me?
We already have a military aesthetic guy. Like, got it.
Exactly. That was how. Why does he need to be in the Marine Corps? Anyway. He's an architect who was selected by the Guardians as Hal Jordan's backup after Guy Gardner. Literally, the description here is just that after Guy Gardner was seriously injured in a disaster, and that could probably apply to any of the terrible things that have happened to Guy Gardner. At first, I find this ironic. Hal was like, I really don't like John very much. He has a belligerent attitude towards authority. I don't think he'd make a good partner, which, again, coming from Hal Jordan is kind of ironic. But the Guardians are like, no, he's good. He's your partner. And he's like, okay, fine. And then they went on a mission. And of course, you know how when people first introduce a certain type of character, like, okay, if this is their first black superhero, why couldn't they just go on a random cool mission? Instead, their first mission is to protect a racist politician. I guess to test test the character of John Stewart. And again, Jordan thought that Stewart wasn't taking it seriously, and Stewart just kind of stood back and let Hal Jordan get distracted after an assassination attempt took place. He followed like the decoy, and Jon Stewart was just standing there because it turns out that it was a ploy by the politician all along to take advantage of the situation and make himself look good, and that black people look bad. So Jon Stewart just kind of saw through the whole situation and was able to successfully arrest people that needed to be arrested. And since that moment, Jordan was like, "Okay, you know what? You're an excellent recruit after all. I'm sorry." Well,
and even that beginning of the sort of like Jordan's attitude toward him originally reflects a kind of naive attitude that white people had, specifically in the 70s, about like black people's anger. So I was like, man, one of these black guys is so mad. Well, I don't know what they would have to be mad about. That's crazy.
Well,
He's so anti-authority.
Like, oh, they can't do their job. They're too angry and upset. And instead, John was just in complete control of the situation the whole time. Go him. Again, he's been working with the Justice League sometimes when Hal Jordan isn't available. And he has reached the status of guardianship, which he eventually relinquished when it wasn't needed anymore. But the fact that he ascended to be like a guardian on Iowa just goes to show his character is kind of unmovable.
I never saw it. Did he get like small and blue when he became a guardian?
No.
We should look that up. I want to know.
No.
Jon Stewart's version of Guardian. Just himself. But yeah. Some interesting things about Jon Stewart as well. He doesn't hide his identity. From the very beginning, when, Jordan was like, here's the standard uniform, complete with domino mask. He's like, nah, I don't need that. No. I'm not going to hide my identity, which is a bold choice.
Yeah.
And interesting.
And he's also like, and that thing doesn't hide your identity, stupid.
Also of note, his constructions aren't hollow. It's something that Hal Jordan noticed. And I think it may be a nod to, I don't know, how sturdy of a person he is in Steadfast, but also maybe a wink to, like, he used to be an architect.
Exactly. Yep.
Because, like, his constructions are, like, never hollow. They're built from, like, they're just, like, the complete building. Brick, mortar, bolts, everything.
Yeah, it's not just, like, outline and windows. It's, like, everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. It's not just constructions made of light. It's like, oh, no, that's an actual building. That's being thrown at me. And also, he will kill if necessary. He doesn't really have the whole, like, oh, no, this person will destroy the universe, but it's me taking a human life. Like, what should I do? He will just be like, oh, universe, one person.
Yep.
That's how I feel.
Which I thought was awesome.
I will kill if necessary. Yeah. Like if somebody.
Yeah, exactly.
If I'm at Subway. Sorry, go ahead.
What?
I was gonna say if I'm at Subway and I get like a footlong Italian B&T and I say I want peppers and they assume jalapenos, I will kill them necessarily because it's necessary at that point. So I get it, is what I'm saying. I'm like the Jon Stewart of the Subway, is what I'm saying. Go ahead. No, I see what you're saying. No, I relate to this. Yes.
And currently, after Rebirth, John's become a leader of like the mixed Green Lantern and Sinestro Corps. So he is in charge of like training new Green Lanterns as they come. So basically, he's just old reliable in terms of his place in the Green Lanterns.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
And scene.
I love him so much. I mean, I think the Justice League animated show really cemented my love for him. And then, I mean, just reading him throughout the comics, I love how each one of these lanterns have their place within the core as a bigger whole, but also on Earth with the Justice League and then themselves. It's really cool. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I love
you can't understate the importance that Justice League Unlimited, well, Justice League, the animated series, and then Justice League Unlimited had for John's exposure. For a lot of people, he is Green Lantern. Like he's, you know what I mean? Like he was their first experience with that character. That was a definitive depiction. I mean, Bruce Timm's work is just amazing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's not to say he wouldn't be important without that, but I think that that's really what rocketed him, sort of in terms of popularity and significance, sort of shoulder to shoulder with people like Hal and Kyle, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the next Green Lantern is Kyle Rayner.
I thought
Everybody
you said
loves
reindeer.
Kyle Reindeer. That's his furry incarnation.
Oh my God, no, because it's Christmas, you freaking weirdo.
Oh, that's things at Christmas. They worship Christmas too, Noah. I know.
All right, come on, go on.
Well,
go.
you're just like, I don't want them to be in our reindeer games. Wrong. You're wrong. Anyway. So Kyle Rayner, he's the nice one. he's the Tim Drake of the Green Lantern Corps.
Pretty much.
Yay!
Yeah, really. I mean, he's the sweet boy. Every Lantern crew's got a sweet boy. Anyway, okay. So basically, we already kind of alluded to the context that Kyle arrives in, so to speak, which is basically the Parallax event. There's a period of time. It's in 1994. Where Hal, like I said, loses it, kills the Green Lantern, Corps decimates the Guardians, everything like that, and only Ganthet is left. I don't know if all the other Guardians are killed, but they're at least dispatched.
Yeah,
and only one power ring is left in that's functioning, if it exists at all. And Ganthet comes to Earth and finds. Where Hal and Guy, that the ring scans the Earth and finds like that they're the perfect match. I think Ganthet, one of the Guardians, is like, "You'll do."
Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
And bestows the ring upon Kyle. Now, some of the idea of the reboot and having a new Green Lantern, it's the 90s and they were trying new things and trying to update a lot of this stuff. But the other thing is like I mentioned before, Hal's death is so besmirching and ignominious that there's just no way to recover that character. But Green Lantern is still a really popular property, so the idea of doing a reboot is just pretty necessary. So from the bottom up, they get to reimagine, okay, who else would the Guardians, who else might they deputize as a Green Lantern, and what's interesting. So if the idea behind the Green Lanterns is that they take their iron will and form the emotional spectrum with it, so it requires great will and imagination for the constructs. If Hal represents, like I said, that steel will, Kyle's on the other end. It's not that he doesn't have will. You have to have that to be a Green Lantern, but he has a massive imagination. The idea is, and there's a meta element here, Kyle is a comic book artist as his profession, a commercial artist, right? Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes, exactly, right? So with Kyle, you get this kind of rather than just the physical or the sort of simple constructs of a giant boxing glove or a hammer or scissors or something like that, which by the way are all pretty cool. There's something beautiful in that simplicity, like Hal or Guy would do. Kyle's known for very ornate, complicated designs. So, complicated machinery, different kinds of blasters, and especially he's the guy that really introduced mecha into the Green Lantern world. Mm-hmm. He's always known to creating these gigantic suits of armor and stuff like that. So
what a nerd.
Yeah, so he's a total nerd. And I mean, in this period before Hal returns, it's 1994 to the mid-aughts, basically. Kyle is the exclusive Green Lantern with a few other exceptions. He's the main Green Lantern. Alan's still floating around and things like that. And originally, Kyle doesn't take this all that seriously, or he just doesn't know how committed he is to being a superhero. And
he's kind of forced.
What's that?
I said he was kind of forced, so it's
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because not only was he forced, but he was what you might call Major Forrest. The villain Major Forrest kills his girlfriend Alexandra DeWitt and shoves her in a refrigerator. Her body.
And that's where that phrase comes from.
Yes, exactly. She was a great character. It sucks that she got killed, but she was a great character. And like the idea was that she was trying to encourage Kyle to like take this responsibility seriously. She's murdered and everything like that. And then in her honor, Kyle like decides to really take the Green Lantern thing, like just understand the weight of it and be the best superhero he can be. Sorry, you were gonna say.
How fucked up? Like, I mean, to be fair, it's hard to write relationships in any form of media and make it believable. Their relationship was great. She was a great partner to him. She was super supportive in like everything. And then for him to actually listen to her, these writers thought, oh, we need to kill her to make him listen to her. It's like, that's not how this works. That's not how this should work. Like, that's definitely, like, it's just, I hate that. I hate the way they killed her. I hate that they continue to do that. I'm done. I'm just saying.
No, I mean, capitalize on that rage. I'm feeling.
Yeah,
I totally get that. Like, especially in this period, it's very late in the day, by the way, at this point, to have women brutalized in this fashion, and like
anybody. I mean, to be fair.
Well, no, but I mean, I agree. Anybody, but we don't want to be like all lives matter with this thing. You know what I mean?
No,
like, specifically, women have been sort of overly brutalized and maimed and things like that, and used as objects in the hero story for men. Like props to get them to do stuff. This is no different now. No excuse there, but I'll say in terms of Kyle's perspective, I think that the writers were trying to say, he was a normal person who would be very terrified and want to have a normal life and everything like that. So it would probably take a great kind of tragedy or something like that to get him to really understand his solemn vow here. I think that's a nice piece of writing. It's sad that it comes at the cost of, this brutality towards women. But what I was going to say is that sort of going back and not to miss, I think Kyle also like the idea of having a artist who's a Green Lantern and getting to have these ornate designs in the constructs. It also marks just a period in time where the art standards in comics are increasing. And so it does just sort of make sense to have a reason. It's like, okay, why, you know what I mean? Yeah. So, and I have to admit, like, this is the Green Lantern that I grew up with. And so I just took it for granted that that was part of the Green Lantern power set. As a matter of fact, there was a period of adjustment when I went back to reading Hal as the Green Lantern, where there's a kind of simplicity.
I hated it.
That I was like, yeah, you hated it? Yeah. I was like,
I did. Yeah. I really did. I mean, I agree with you. And like, I know there's just something more comic booky with how Kyle did his powers or what he made and stuff, and then you have fucking Hal come in, and he has like a gun or a giant punching glove. It's like, okay, like who's wait? You're supposed to be the more powerful one. This guy's like making like, I don't know, creatures out of his shit, and you're making a punching glove.
It's interesting you mention that, because at some level, power and power level become very important in the Kyle story. I do want to say real quick, one thing that happens for Kyle is that he goes on the Justice League. At first, he actually was with the Teen Titans and dated Donna Troy and everything like that. Yeah, it's fantastic. But he ends up getting upgraded, so to speak, or finding himself in jail, not least of which because Grant Morrison wants to write the Big Seven, and you need Green Lantern, and Kyle was the Green Lantern at the time. But it's actually really good for him because, like, Wally at first doesn't trust Kyle because Wally grew up with Hal because was the younger kid, but they become really good friends. And weirdly enough, and I think this is really cool, Batman sees tremendous potential in Kyle.
Man, he's actually Kyle a lot.
He's like my favorite Robin, or the best Robin, Tim.
Exactly. He's like, "Are you Tim? I think you're Tim."
Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, and so I wouldn't even say Batman takes Kyle under his wing. It's more like their dynamic is sort of Batman is sort of like, "You're doing a good job." I mean, in his very like, "I barely look at you" kind of way.
Yeah,
but you know what I mean. Like,
I just always loved that Barry and Hal were best friends, and then Wally and Kyle became really good friends. I'm like, look at the legacy. It's so cute.
Yeah, you got to do it. So I think a lot of the most interesting Green Lantern stuff during that period comes, like for Kyle, comes through the Justice League stories. But anyway, so in his story, I mean, the important trajectory here is that like he actually becomes way more powerful. He ends up absorbing the energy that Hal left behind in the sun when he killed himself, and becoming a character known as Ion. Now, this is the original, origin of Ion, which was later on going to be something more important, but it was just Kyle's persona as this, nearly omnipotent character. And he that power finally gets surrendered and everything. Later on, we'll find out that Ion is the kind of the spirit of the will, in a way that Parallax, the evil spirit of fear, or what have you.
They're like the entities. They're the embodiment
the entities,
of that
that's right.
thing.
Yeah. But anyway, so Kyle becomes Ion, reduces back to his normal level, and around about that time, Rebirth happens and Hal comes back, and then Kyle is relegated to being a kind of, in not a bad way, but like a secondary Lantern.
Okay, and then this is where he's just like Tim, because where has he been?
Yes, that's right. But there's a couple of things that do happen with Kyle a lot, which is because he's like this pure heart character. A lot of times he will become, over the course of these comics, the repository for insane levels of energy and power and stuff like that. So again, I think he was possessed by Ion. Again, he was sadly during the Sinestro War possessed by Parallax, and then he would become through his mastery of all of the different lanterns. Variety, all the different colors. He was a white lantern for a while.
The rainbow lantern.
Yeah, exactly. How is he not gay? He's the gay one. No, anyway. Yeah. But yes, basically that's Kyle. He was the sort of like the torchbearer for the franchise.
He actually, sorry, just fun fact. No. He actually went back to the Titans in Rebirth. So when Rebirth kind of like changed their team a bit, he went back onto the Titans team. I don't know if he's still there now, but he was a couple months ago. So.
Yeah, it's really weird because it's like he was involved in Grant Morrison's just absolutely paradigmatic run. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like, in certain ways, I just associate him with the JLA or the Justice League, but at the same time, his concept fits way better with the Titans. You know what I mean? Because he is like a younger Lantern.
Him with the Titans. I think he fits well with them too. I also love that there's a Green Lantern on the Titans because it's like the Teen Titans emulate the Justice League and the Titans are supposed to emulate the Justice League as well. So to kind of have weird little analogs of all of them.
Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's also interesting because the now that you mention it, the Green Lanterns haven't usually had that sidekick aspect. So him as the youngest Lantern of these major ones is like at least up until recently, is like the closest thing to a Titan level Lantern. But yeah, so like I said, he's the nice one. He's the character that like often ends up being like the powerhouse, ironically. But so that's Kyle Rayner.
Yay!
And
then on to my two favorites. So you
ignored all the history and now you're two favorites.
Yes. All that stuff didn't matter, guys. This is what matters. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. This one's gonna go a little quicker than those two, only because they're relatively new. Like Simon came out in 2012, so I mean he's still pretty fresh. So I'll go with Simon Baz. He was the first one of the new two ones that have come out recently. Quick little neat backstory with him. Oh, he did first appear in the New 52 on the Free Comic Book Day special edition of the Trinity War. So it was a free comic book, and that was his first appearance. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
That's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah. So and then a little bit more into like the conception of the character. So he's the first Arab American member of the Green Lantern Corps, and his heritage and hometown is both influenced by Jeff Johns, because Jeff Johns is half Lebanese and is also a native to Detroit, Michigan, and Simon's from Detroit and he's Lebanese. So I thought that was pretty cool as well.
And Michigan has a huge Muslim population.
Exactly. So to get into kind of his origin, because that's really one of the most important parts of these two characters, because that's kind of what's made them and what's made them stick around. So after he lost his job at Detroit, the automotive industry, he began stealing cars to help with finances. But one night when he stole a car, he discovered there was an explosive in the back of the car, and due to his
I hate when that
Yeah. Damn this explosive. But the bad thing was, due to his ethnic and religious background, he was persecuted as a terrorist, which is really fucked up because of who he was. It's like, yeah, he was stealing the car, but like his intention wasn't terrorism.
Well, again, I feel like those always kind of lay it on really thick.
Mm-hmm.
Just like Jon Stewart's introduction, it's like, and your first mission, protect this racist politician.
Yeah, and then his first introduction is, you're going to be labeled as a terrorist, and then when you're captured, you're going to be tortured and waterboarded and stuff. It's terrible.
It's the opposite with me, which sucks, because I'll like get arrested for a crime, and I'll be like, I'm a terrorist! And they're like, you're a car thief at best. Like, they don't take me seriously. It's bullshit.
But while this was happening, Hal Jordan and Sinestro's, so this was during like Blackest Day and Brightest Night and all that, their malfunctioning rings presumed both of them dead. And the weird thing was that their rings fused together and then found Simon. So when Simon was in jail waiting for whatever was going to happen to him, the ring found him and found him to be the best suited for it, and then broke him out of the prison. And the ring told him to go to Oa. Well, he was like, nah, fuck that. I'm not going to go there. So he goes back to Michigan. I think the ring took him to like Florida or something like that. And he was like, no, fuck that. So he goes back to Detroit and finds his sister. Another kind of backstory with him, and to paint like why there's strain in his family, is that he was in a car accident with his sister's husband that ended up killing him. So there's this whole like family dynamic in there. There's the whole, the Islamophobia and all of that stuff with his story, which I think is really neat and really gives depth to the character, and not just like, oh, his tragedy happened to him, now he's a Green Lantern. It's like, he doesn't want to be. The ring found him. It's Sinestro and Hal Jordan's ring, which is really interesting. And then to kind of give his big story and what happened after his origin, the Guardians pretty much were not liking everything that was happening with the Green Lanterns because of free will. They think that free will was the enemy of will, which is interesting. So they create this third army, which is kind of like, you guys played Injustice, right? Yeah, so in Injustice 2, I think it was, Brainiac's like minions that come down. Do you remember those?
Yeah.
So
little Brainiacs with robot faces.
Exactly. So like this third army kind of looked like that, but they had like green all over them. And they were essentially feeding off of Green Lantern energy. They were killing them and taking the energy and stuff. So
they like remade the Manhunters.
Exactly. But while that was happening, and the Justice League finding out that, oh, this possible terrorist has a Green Lantern ring and Hal's gone, all the other Green Lanterns are gone, they're like, we need to stop this. So the Justice League tries to capture Simon, and Simon's ring is malfunctioning, so it starts attacking the Justice League. So his whole introduction is just one giant misunderstanding. So, like,
appropriate.
Yeah, and then like Hal comes back to save the day, and blah 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 blah. So that's where he is. And then the reason why I'm kind of going into Jessica Cruz, the next one, is because their stories are very much intertwined. So Jessica Cruz, her first appearance was actually a cameo appearance, which is interesting. So she was first.
It took place in a locket?
No.
Sorry.
No, so she was teased. I can't remember what the issue was, but it was towards the end of the New 52. So, or actually Forever Evil. Right before Forever Evil, it was teased, like you saw her hand and then like the power ring. So after the events of, what's it called? Forever Evil, Power Ring dies, or during Forever Evil, actually, Power Ring dies. The Power Ring finds Jessica Cruz, and then she becomes Power Ring. So the little backstory on Power Ring. Power Ring is Earth 3 version of the Green Lanterns, and it feeds on fear. So it doesn't work off of will, it feeds on fear, which is interesting because it's green.
I do love that she ends up getting the ring of the crime syndicate's Green Lantern.
Yes. Yeah. I thought it was a really interesting way to introduce her. So to explain why she gets the power ring, So Jessica Cruz was with a group of friends out hiking and hunting or whatever, and they stumble across this group of men burying a body. And that's what everybody wants to come across when you're camping in the middle of nowhere. And of course, everything turns shitty because they kidnap them and they murder her friends right in front of her. And she ends up escaping. She survives barely. But ever since then, she has super high anxiety. She has PTSD from it. She's literally like prepping for the end of the world. Like she's in her little like doomsday closet, like putting a bunch of water bottles and everything. And then that's when the power ring finds her. So power ring finds her because she's consumed with so much fear and she has so much anxiety that she wakes up every day thinking it's the end of the world or you can't do it. Like I'm never going to be able to do this. So she's emitting fear, and that's why the power ring finds her.
So the power ring is an enabler.
Yeah, the power ring is a dick. Like, so not like the Green Lantern rings where they'll tell you like, hey Siri, how many cups are in a pint or whatever.
Yeah.
The power ring is like, no, you're a piece of shit. Now do this. Like, so like it made her.
So the power ring is like the back of your head.
Exactly. Yeah. So the power ring pretty much makes her lose control and she goes a rampage through the city. She's actually confronted by the Doom Patrol that want to like take the ring from her. And then Batman shows up and actually inspires her to take control of the ring and ends the rampage, which I think is a pretty interesting person to show up to talk somebody off the ledge. So.
Yeah, Batman comes in and he's like, take control of the ring! Take control of it!
Yeah. And then the end of New 52 pretty much ended with the Darkseid War. So when Darkseid's daughter Grail came to Earth, she attacked Jessica and tried to use her ring to summon the Anti-Monitor to fight for her father. Now, this Anti-Monitor was from a different Earth, so it wasn't from the one that they killed prior. Whatever, comics, it's confusing. So, thinking of ways to stop the fight between Anti-Monitor and Darkseid, Jessica and Mr. Miracle, which I love this team up so much, break out of the crime syndicate in order to fight all of them and close the portal that was being used to summon the Anti-Monitor. So pretty much while this was happening, Flash was being chased by Death, essentially the Black Racer. It's really confusing. I'm sorry.
Comics.
It's comics. A lot of stuff is happening Darkseid War. If you have not read Darkseid War, you really should read it. It's insane. It's very beautifully done. So pretty much at the end of this,
lots of drama.
Yes, lots of drama.
Lots
Black
of big
Racer
things happening all the time.
Yeah, Black Racer is trying to catch Flash, and Flash can't stop running. If he stops running, Black Racer will catch him, and then he'll become Death itself. And Jessica sees this happening, and what she does is gets in between Black Racer and Flash. And you think that Jessica dies because her ring disintegrates, but actually the Black Racer killed Velthum, which is pretty much the power source of the power rings from Earth 3. So it kills that entity, doesn't kill her, and then she becomes a Green Lantern like immediately after. It's like an actual Green Lantern ring finds her. So then she becomes Green Lantern. And then in Rebirth, Simon and Jessica both co-star the title. And I love this team up so much since Simon has like a year up on her of being a Green Lantern. He's kind of tasked to train her, but they don't get along well. She has high anxiety and she can't really make constructs that well. So what Hal decides to do to make them work together is he fuses their lantern that charges the rings together. And it's like, y'all can't use your powers unless you're together and do the oath together and charge your batteries together. So they're best friends ever since. Took them like 3 trades to become best friends, but yeah, they're good friends now.
I know she's come a long way now, but I feel like early on she was definitely like of the two. Like Simon's like, look, we have to make a particle accelerator. She's like, I can make a triangle.
No, I mean, and that's interesting. Like that's why I love their dynamic so much, because Simon sees it more of a methodical approach. Like he knows how to do it. It just comes natural to him. Like he creates guns and stuff. He's really cool with what he does with his constructs. but it's frustrating for him to deal with Jessica because Jessica second guesses her all the time, second guesses herself all the time. She doesn't have great will, which is what's needed to be a Green Lantern. But it turns out she does have great will because she's overcoming this anxiety and takes great will and, introspection to overcome all that. So she ends up coming into her own, and her constructs are very, I don't know how to put this, like very floral, very like a flower blooming. So it's really interesting how they interpreted that. She becomes a very powerful Green Lantern, and now she's off in space with Cyborg and Starfire, and she's great. She's come a long way.
I think she has, and she is a wonderful character, but I think it would be hilarious if, like, how like all the other, they're like, oh, I'm making a big sword, or this is a gun, or this is like a giant robot, but because she's had a lot of anxiety and she's been in and out of therapy, her constructs are like, this is my mother's disappointment in me, or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, it's very powerful therapeutic devices, something like that.
I mean, joking aside, I think out of most of the Green Lanterns they've made, these two are the most relatable for readers because
for sure.
you have somebody that's dealing with a real world problem with high anxiety. Mm-hmm. Like, have either of you seen, this is just an easy example that I think the listeners would know too, that, the Justice League versus the Fatal Five?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
man.
Yeah. So you see in the beginning with Jessica, like she wakes up and she has this internal monologue, like, I could do this, like, get up, you can get up, you could do this. Like, she's like prepping herself and constantly doing these mantras in her head to even just get out the door. So, like, to see that in a character, and especially with the character that needs great will, is something refreshing to see. It's new. It's not some fighter pilot or some military guy. It's a real person. I've always loved that. That's why I've always loved Jessica. So.
And just that the fact that they're kind of well characterized and very discernible in terms of like what they are and how they approach the world from the other Green Lanterns, I think makes them not feel redundant. And they also don't, even though it's a Latina woman and an Arabic Muslim man, it doesn't feel like they're just like token like creations or something like that. Because
no, not at all.
With Simon, you get like, I think one of the first like deeply reluctant Green Lanterns. We haven't really seen that much before. That's a trope in other, other comic book franchises, but most of the Green Lanterns have been pretty on it in terms of wanting to have the power and stuff like that. And then, like you mentioned, Jessica is someone who's crippled with, or at least has that as a base that she has to overcome, crippled with anxiety and things like that. Another really new addition and stuff like that. And it goes into this tradition of making like these really strong characters fill what would otherwise be a very uniform, character.
Yeah, I mean, and I love how organic it was, especially with Simon's origin. Like, of course, he's going to be reluctant to be the protector of a world that doesn't want him. Even when this took place, because in the story, it talks about what his family went through after, 9/11 and everything, and what he has had to finally overcome. And then for that to happen to him when he was labeled as a terrorist well after the fact, just because of who he was. And then the Justice League not to trust him, and then nobody to trust him, and the whole government to paint him as this bad guy. He's like, why would I want to? No, I don't want to do this. Like, I'm just trying to have a normal life with my family. Yeah, it's great. I love those Green Lanterns. They're great.
Yeah, I was really glad to do this episode. Just
Me
generally,
too.
I love these characters.
I learned so much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and we have a new Patreon subscriber member, whatever we call
Excellent.
them. Yeah. So
Patrons. They're
Yeah.
patrons.
Well, the thing's called Patreon, so it's like
They're zonies. Zonies.
No, we're not making that a thing.
That's fan zonies.
So Anne was kind enough to join our Patreon. So what we normally do is they get an episode to pick, and then we give them a villain, superhero, anti-hero, whatever name and power. So what do you guys got for Anne?
So let's talk it out. So Anne, what was her Patreon pick?
I'm not saying that on air for the second time.
So that makes it difficult because I can't really. What do we?
Oh, it was the one we already were going to do.
Yeah, it was the one we were already going to do.
Okay.
She spins
Ooh.
to turn into her costume.
Okay, so
Linda Carter.
I may need some help with the name here, but what I'm thinking is, so she had the Patreon pick, but we were already going to have the Patreon pick. So it turns out Anne has excellent timing, right? Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yes. So I think that her powers would be something involving like having really good timing. Like she's always in the right spot at the right time. You know what I mean?
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I mean, her name could just be Right Time.
Oh, maybe
I
she's
like
because
dot, like on the dot.
Ooh.
yes. On the dot is really good. And let's say she's a teleporter. You know what I mean? Because we don't really use that much, and I think we used a kind of precognition last time.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, so we'll say that she's a teleporter, but she also has the intuition to be in the sort of the right place at the right time.
I like the idea that it's not something she can control. Like she's like, I really need to finish this essay for class, and then like to be in the right time, she teleports in the middle of a bank robbery.
Yeah, it would be. Oh, it would be great. Yeah, because it would be like that character Darwin from X-Men, where he doesn't. It's unconscious. He doesn't. It like his body evolves to the best, like the defense or to make him more survivable, but he's not necessarily able to control it. I think it would be similar. It would be cool if her teleportation ability was like it put her in the right place, but not necessarily like intentional. There could be a comic aspect to it.
Nice. I like that. Heck yeah.
Yeah, and on the dot is good. It's a bit 50s, but I think it's pretty good.
Like she
She would
literally
be
just
like
has,
in the Doom Patrol.
Yeah, I think that's a very Doom Patrol-y thing. She's just like wears a white costume and there's just like one dot.
Yeah.
Nickname dot.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yay. That's 50s too. I like that. All right. So just, I mean, if you want to get your name and get a superhero and hear us butcher what your superhero or villain would be, you could go to Patreon and subscribe. We also have exclusive episodes that we typically record before these episodes. And you definitely want to listen to them because I think one of the most recent ones was a big hit because of somebody's apartment issue. All right, comic book recommendation time. So I guess I'll kick it off since I was the last one talking for the last 20 minutes. Mine's going to be really easy to find, but I feel like it flew under the radar quite a bit. So it's Green Lantern's Rebirth. It takes place, it's from 2016. Jeff Johns wrote it, not to be confused with another recommendation that's going to be coming up. It's just Green Lanterns under the reboot of Rebirth. So it's the one with Jessica and Simon. You clearly know which one I'm talking about. All right, who's next?
Should I go next? Because that's hilarious.
Yeah.
All right. So mine's called Green Lantern Rebirth, but it's also written by Jeff Johns. Illustrated by Ethan von Sciver. It came out and it started in October 2004, so that differentiates it. But it also has everyone but the last two that we talked about. Yeah. So it does have Hal Jordan, Kyle Rayner, Jon Stewart, and Guy Gardner. No Jessica, no Simon.
I think Alan Scott's in it too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. And so is Kilowog, and so is Batman.
Hey, he's not a Green Lantern.
About the lanterns appearance.
Yeah.
I was going to call you Jordan. Because Hal Jordan's on my mind. But yes, Green Lantern Rebirth, still written by Jeff Johns, came out in 2000.
Oh, that's the distinction. Wait, is yours Green Lantern?
It says Green Lantern.
Okay.
And then
mine's Green Lanterns. Because there's two.
Nice. Don't go with the extra S.
No, go with the extra S. All right, go on, Jared.
I will get them both. That's what I say. But so I really wanted to recommend some Guy stuff because Guy Gardner's my favorite. But outside of a few things that happened in the 90s and I think some recent stuff that I really either haven't read or just didn't like that much, I have to recommend instead Green Lantern Kyle Rayner Volume 1 by Ron Mars and Daryl Banks and Romeo Tangral. I think that was the inker. Anyway.
That was fair.
Yeah. But it's just a tighter story. This is the sort of birth of Kyle Rayner, the reboot in the 90s. It came out, like I said, around 1994. And it's just a fantastic, well-told, scaled down story. So they take away a lot of crap, and I think you'll really enjoy it. It's
nice.
Especially if you aren't a Kyle fan, if you have started reading more recently, Kyle's not Hal, so he's not like the big Green Lantern that they're always going to refer back to. And, he's not really as frequent in the comics now. So this is a way for you to really get why he was a big deal in the 90s. So, yeah.
Nice.
Aw,
Yay.
I'll pick that one up.
All right. Well, Merry Christmas, guys.
Merry Christmas.
What the heck? You guys can't say Merry Christmas back? Why is that funny?
I did. I said Merry Christmas.
Okay, I'll say, and a Happy New Year.
Yeah, happy holidays, y'all.
Nice.
Thanks for listening. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at The Phantom Zone Pod for more podcast updates.